Did you include librarians into evaluation, meaning that they receive some feedback from this process?
The assessment of the course, the actual assessment of students was my responsibility. But we also had a course evaluation schedule, and the librarians helped write some questions about the information literacy part so that they could get feedback as well about how they found the librarians in terms of supporting them and the like. And they said that, first of all, they asked themselves, and they keep records of how many student inquiries they get from each course. They said they got more questions originally from my group than they did from others. And, I quote, they said, but they were better questions. And I was a bit worried, and I said, well, if I'm making more work for you. And they said, that's work we like, because you don't understand how boring it is when the 20th student comes in and says, I have an assignment about this subject, what should I do? But instead they came back and said, my database couldn't find this author, what should I do? And they said, that's a much better question. We like those sorts of questions. We don't mind those, because then we can do reader education. When they come in waving an assignment and saying, I have to find something, it's very boring for the librarian, because it's the same question every time. And it shows no understanding. So they assured me that they didn't mind more questions. The other parts of the evaluation that came back that they asked about frequency of use of library, confidence in using databases and so on, and they were very positive. The other lecturers also, I didn't mention in the seminar, initially there was arguments. Are we giving them too much? Why should we do this for the students? Surely they should learn for themselves. This is not our job. So that's why I took the first course, because I said, well, I'll take the responsibility. But then they came back and said, this is so good. The students are doing so much better. How can we reinforce this? So once they realised the benefits, my colleagues also joined in and started reinforcing the same skills, which is what you need to get the transfer.
You mentioned some standards for information literacy within your university. Is it a nationwide standard? How does it work in your country?
We developed the Australian New Zealand Institute of Information Literacy framework for information literacy. We called it the Framework for Information Literacy, and it included standards. And it's in its second edition, and it's available from a website that we can probably add to this discussion so people can go and look for it. Now, when we started, we had some people from the American College Research Library come and visit and explain their information literacy standards. We also had our own research, including Christine Bruce's research on the relational model of information literacy. So we didn't just take the American model, we modified and came up with our own standards. And our own standards especially included storage and retrieval of information, which at that time was not in the American standard. We also put more emphasis on the ethical use of information than they had in their standard. So we made these changes and we tried it out, and I did some research into how people understood the standards and where there were ambiguities. We came back and we modified the standard, and colleagues also introduced content about how to teach information literacy, about strategies for constructing the syllabuses and for assessment. And so our framework doesn't just include the standards, but it includes other articles about how to use information literacy in higher education. This is explicitly a framework for higher education. So I think it's a useful starting point for others to look at, because it's not just someone's idea of what the standard should be. The second edition is based on trying out a standard and refining it and adding what we had learnt about how to teach and how to assess. So it's a good tool.
What is the next step? What is the future in your opinion in this field?
Okay. I mentioned in this workshop that we are very much moving to the knowledge economy and the information society. Now, I didn't labour the point because I thought I was amongst people who would know this, but I would postulate that this is as significant a change as was the development of the printing press. Because just as the printing press meant information could become available in different languages to vastly more people, because, for example, the Bible could be printed in Czech and it could be printed in English, instead of just being held in the monastery by the scholars. Well, now, my academic papers and all sorts of things are on the internet. And anyone in any country can access those. So we have another explosion of access to information. So we need to rethink how we teach. Instead of teaching from the textbook, we now have to help people interrogate and use the vast resource of information in our information society. And frankly, I think that is as big a change as the printing press is in terms of accessibility of information. But we lack one thing that books usually have. Books have usually been put through a publisher, and the publisher has edited the book and checked, is this book of good quality? Often asked for others to referee it. Anyone can put statements on the internet without any editing or refereeing. So the ability to evaluate the quality of information becomes the user's responsibility entirely. Now, it always was the user's responsibility, but now there is no safeguard. We have to, if we are going to be information literate and use information well, we have to be able to evaluate the information that we access and determine its quality before we use it. Now, that means changing how we teach. So, as I say, I don't think university lecturers and universities as a whole have grasped this issue yet. And that's the challenge of the 21st century. To respond to the knowledge economy and to the information society by changing how we teach, to encourage people to become professional, lifelong learners. So at the end of their degree, they see themselves as ready to practice lifelong learning in their profession. Not, I am now ready to be the professional, per se. So it's a big change, and that's the future, and that's the opportunity.